Here's a tactical reality you're not ready for. Your fortified rural compound with perimeter fencing and guard towers is going to get you killed in the first month, while the person hiding in an abandoned water treatment plant that nobody remembers exists is going to survive unnoticed for years. Everyone fantasizes about defending their homestead with AR-15s and night vision. You've watched too many movies about last stands and heroic defenses, and you think survival is about holding ground against raiders. But here's what actually happens when collapse arrives. The most defensible positions aren't the ones you fight from. They're the ones nobody knows exists, and the best fortress is the one that doesn't look like a fortress at all. This is about location science, the physics and psychology of defensibility, and why the preppers building compounds are painting targets on themselves while the smart survivors are moving into infrastructure nobody values anymore.
Let's start with why the tactical compound fantasy fails. And this is going to hurt if you've invested in rural property for defense. Compounds have a fundamental problem. They're visible, they're fixed positions, and they require active defense, which means you need numbers. Here's the tactical reality. One family cannot defend a property perimeter 24 hours a day. You need sleep, you need to gather resources, you need to maintain equipment, and while you're doing those things, your perimeter is vulnerable. A fixed defensive position only works if you have enough people to maintain continuous watch and response capability. That's at minimum 8 to 12 people for basic 24/7 coverage. Most families don't have that. And even if you do, you have a bigger problem. Visibility means targeting. A fortified compound with walls and fencing and cleared fields of fire looks like exactly what it is, a place with resources worth defending, which means a place worth attacking. You're advertising that you have food, water, supplies, and security measures valuable enough to protect, which makes you a target for every desperate group that comes through. The mathematics of siege warfare haven't changed in thousands of years. The defender needs supplies and people, the attacker just needs patience and numbers. And in prolonged collapse, the attacker usually wins, because they can leave and come back while you're stuck defending. Here's the historical evidence that proves compounds fail. Every fortified position in history eventually fell if the siege lasted long enough. Castles, forts, compounds, they all have the same vulnerability. They cannot move, and they eventually run out of supplies or personnel. In modern disasters and conflicts, the data shows that fixed defensive positions become death traps. Waco, Ruby Ridge, every standoff situation ends the same way. The fixed position loses because it cannot escape and it attracts overwhelming force. In the Bosnian War, the people who survived weren't the ones defending fortified houses. They were the ones hiding in basements and moving between safe locations, staying invisible. In every economic collapse from Argentina to Venezuela to Zimbabwe, the people broadcasting their preparedness through visible security measures became targets. The people surviving quietly, without advertising, became the long-term survivors. This isn't about cowardice. This is about mathematics and logistics. A visible fixed position with limited personnel cannot win against motivated attackers with time and numbers. You might repel the first probe, maybe the second, but eventually you run out of ammunition or vigilance or luck, and then you lose everything.
So here's the framework for actual defensive positions in collapse, and this is where abandoned infrastructure becomes valuable. The best fortress is the one nobody knows exists. And the second best fortress is the one nobody thinks is worth investigating. This is about concealment over confrontation, invisibility over defense, and understanding that not being found is better than being able to fight. The scientific principle is simple: energy conservation. Every confrontation costs resources, including ammunition, medical supplies, calories, and psychological stress, while concealment costs almost nothing. The people who survive long-term aren't the ones winning firefights. They're the ones avoiding firefights entirely by being in locations that don't attract attention.
Here's what makes a location defensible through concealment rather than fortification. First, it needs to be forgotten, not hidden, but psychologically invisible because people don't think about it anymore. Second, it needs multiple exits, never one way in and out. You need escape routes if discovered. Third, it needs to be structurally sound enough to provide shelter, but not attractive enough to draw squatters or scavengers. Fourth, it ideally has resources like water access or residual supplies that weren't valuable enough to loot initially. Fifth, it needs to be located away from main travel routes, but not so remote that getting there is difficult. And sixth, it needs to have a plausible reason for your presence if you're discovered, so you don't look like you're hiding supplies worth taking. This framework eliminates 99% of locations, but the 1% that remains becomes incredibly valuable because these places offer security through obscurity, which is the strongest security that exists.
Let's break down the specific locations that become instant fortresses, starting with the most valuable and overlooked, abandoned water treatment plants. Here's why these are perfect. They were built for function, not appearance, so they're industrial and unattractive. They're usually outside town centers but accessible by road. They have structural integrity because they were critical infrastructure, and most importantly, they have the one thing everyone needs: access to water. Even if the treatment equipment doesn't work, the location is on a water source, whether that's a river, aquifer access, or reservoir, because that's why the plant was built there originally. The infrastructure provides natural concealment because these facilities are typically surrounded by fencing or walls that nobody bothered to remove, not for defense, but just because removing industrial fencing costs money nobody wanted to spend. The buildings are concrete and steel, resistant to weather and time, with multiple rooms that can serve different functions. And here's the critical part. Most people don't think about water treatment plants. They're not residential, so squatters don't target them first. They're not retail, so looters skip them. And they're not obviously valuable like warehouses or stores. The tactical advantages are significant, even though you're not building a tactical position. Multiple buildings mean you can live in one and store in another, creating operational security. Visitors don't see your entire setup. The concrete construction provides thermal mass, helping regulate temperature without power, warmer in winter and cooler in summer. The industrial setting means you can make noise during salvage or construction without it being unusual if anyone is nearby. The water access is the ultimate force multiplier. You solve the biggest collapse problem immediately, and water means you can trade, preserve food, maintain hygiene, and survive long-term. The psychological invisibility is the key. People driving past an old water treatment plant see industrial decay, not a survival location. You're hiding in plain sight. Security through obscurity means you don't need guards or fences or defensive measures that advertise your presence. You just need to not draw attention, which is infinitely easier than defending against attention. Here's how you actually use this location. You move in quietly, repair what's necessary for habitability, but don't improve the external appearance. You want it to keep looking abandoned. You set up inside the most structurally sound building using internal rooms without windows for sleeping and storage, keeping your presence invisible from outside. You establish water access through existing infrastructure if possible, or by drilling if necessary. The location already has the geology and access rights that make this feasible. You create multiple escape routes. These facilities usually have several buildings and exits. Map them all and keep them clear. You stockpile supplies in distributed caches, not all in one location, so if you're discovered and have to leave quickly, you don't lose everything. And you maintain the abandoned appearance. If the fence was broken, keep it broken. If windows were covered with plywood, keep the plywood. The goal is to look exactly like what you were before you arrived, so nobody notices the change.
Second location type: small rural fire stations that close due to budget cuts or consolidation. These are scattered throughout rural areas, brick or concrete construction, typically 1,500 to 3,000 square feet, and they have features that make them exceptionally useful. Fire stations were built to house equipment and personnel temporarily, which means they have large bay doors for vehicles, industrial electrical systems even if power is down, concrete floors that handle weight and abuse, and usually a small kitchen and bathroom area because firefighters spent time there. The structural integrity is high because these buildings were meant to last, and most still have the original doors and windows intact because there's no market for used fire station parts. The location psychology is perfect. People see a closed fire station as municipal property, not residential, so it's not targeted by squatters looking for homes. It's not retail, so looters skip it in the initial chaos. And it's usually on a main road because fire stations needed quick access to everywhere, which means you have transportation access but also visibility, so this requires more careful occupation than the water plant. The advantages are numerous. The vehicle bays provide covered workspace and storage. You can work on equipment or process resources out of weather and out of sight. The bay doors close and hide everything. The industrial nature means you can set up wood stoves or other heating without it being unusual. Fire stations often had alternative heating because they maintained equipment. The bathroom and kitchen infrastructure exists even if not functional. You have plumbing rough ends and spaces designed for these functions, which makes adaptation easier. Many rural fire stations have wells or were on good water sources because they needed water for trucks. This gives you another path to water security. The construction materials are fire-resistant, which is ironic but useful. Brick and concrete don't burn, which provides protection from fire-based attacks or accidents. And the psychological benefit is significant. Fire stations represent safety and community service, not wealth or supplies. So even if someone notices you there, they don't immediately think you have resources worth taking. The tactical considerations are different from the water plant because fire stations are more visible. You need a plausible cover story. If questioned, you're maintaining the property for the county or organizing community emergency response, something that explains your presence without advertising preparedness. You use the visibility strategically, appearing during day to maintain normalcy, keeping lights and smoke minimal at night so you don't stand out. You keep one bay empty and visible through windows so casual observers see an empty building while living and storing in the back areas. You maintain the exterior to avoid looking fortified, no new fencing or barriers. The building already has structure, you don't need to add military features that draw attention. The goal is to be the quiet, boring presence that people ignore because you look official or utilitarian, not the mysterious occupied building that creates curiosity.
Third location type: old roadside motels that closed due to highway bypasses or economic decline. These are everywhere in America, relics of the road trip era, typically single-story, L-shaped or rectangular buildings with 20 to 40 units. Here's why these become valuable. Each unit is a separate lockable space of about 200 square feet. The construction is concrete block or wood frame that's lasted decades already. There's existing bathroom and kitchenette infrastructure in every unit, and the buildings are designed for short-term human habitation, which means they have basics like windows, doors, and weatherproofing. The layout provides natural operational security. You can occupy one unit, store in another, use another as workshop, distribute your resources and activities so no single point contains everything. The multi-unit structure means you can house an extended family or small community. Each household gets private space, which maintains social stability better than everyone crammed together. The abandonment factor works in your favor because old motels are architectural zombies. Everyone knows they exist, but nobody cares about them. They're too expensive to demolish for the land value in rural areas, too scattered to be useful for development, and just interesting enough that some owner is holding them hoping for a comeback that never arrives. This means they sit there, slowly decaying but structurally sound, ignored by everyone. The location is typically on an old highway or main road, which gives you access to transportation and supplies, but not on the new highway, which means through traffic doesn't see you. The parking lot provides workspace and visible area, which is useful for defense because you can see approaches, but also means you need to manage your visibility carefully. The individual units create natural separation between sleeping, storage, and activities, which provides both security and fire safety. A problem in one unit doesn't immediately affect others. Here's the operational approach for abandoned motels. You occupy multiple non-consecutive units, skipping units between occupied spaces, so from outside it looks more abandoned than it is. You use units on the back side or end, staying away from the road-facing units where headlights sweep through. You maintain the abandoned appearance, don't repair the exterior, leave the old sign broken, keep weeds growing in the parking lot. The goal is to look exactly like the abandoned motel you were before arrival. You use interior units for sleeping and valuable storage, never in first-floor road-facing rooms, always in the back or upper floor if it's two-story, making forced entry harder and less visible. You create multiple cache points. Each unit can hold emergency supplies, so even if one is discovered, you haven't lost everything. And you maintain escape routes. Motel layouts usually have back exits and multiple paths between units. Know every exit and keep them clear and accessible.
Fourth location type: abandoned commercial greenhouses from failed nursery or agricultural businesses. These are glass or plastic structures ranging from small to massive, built on rural or semi-rural land with significant infrastructure already in place. Here's what makes these valuable. First and obviously, they're designed for growing plants, which means you can produce food if you have seeds and knowledge. Second, they have water infrastructure. Commercial greenhouses need irrigation systems, which means wells, pipes, and distribution. Even if currently non-functional, the basics exist. Third, they have thermal properties. Greenhouses capture and hold heat during day, which can be managed for temperature regulation. Fourth, they're transparent, which sounds like a disadvantage, but actually provides security because you can see all approaches. No one can sneak up on a greenhouse. And fifth, they're agricultural, which means they're in rural areas away from population centers but near farm communities that understand and respect agricultural work. The psychological camouflage is interesting because greenhouses have a purpose. If someone sees you there, you're clearly farming or attempting to restart the operation, which is a legitimate survival activity that doesn't scream wealthy prepper with stockpiles. You can actually grow food, which makes your presence self-explanatory and valuable to any community that forms. The farmer growing vegetables is useful, not threatening. The infrastructure advantages are significant. Commercial greenhouses often have backup power setups for critical systems. The wiring and panels might still exist, even if not functional, giving you a starting point for solar or generator systems. The water systems can be repaired or repurposed, and the layout usually includes a potting shed or office area that's actually a small building where you can live while using the greenhouse for its intended purpose. The tactical considerations are unique because greenhouses are visibility trade-offs. You're visible, but acceptably so because agricultural work is visible. It's not suspicious. You live in the attached structure, not the greenhouse itself, using the greenhouse for its purpose and the office or shed as living space. You actually grow food, even if inefficiently, because this justifies your presence and provides production that makes you valuable rather than threatening to nearby survivors. You maintain the agricultural appearance, keep growing something, even if it's just easy crops like tomatoes or beans. You need to look like you're farming, because that's your cover. You use the transparency for security, positioning your living space where you can see the greenhouse interior and all approaches. No one enters without you knowing. And you establish trade relations early. The person producing food has something everyone needs and can trade for other essentials, creating economic relations that provide more security than weapons ever could.
Fifth location type, small rural churches that closed due to declining membership or congregation consolidation. These are scattered throughout rural America, typically wood or brick construction, 1,500 to 4,000 square feet, with specific features that make them useful. Churches were built for community gathering, which means they have large open interior spaces, small side rooms for Sunday school or storage, kitchen facilities because every church has a potluck kitchen, bathroom facilities, and often a basement. The construction quality is usually high because churches were built with donated labor and meant to last generations, solid foundations, good roofs, real craftsmanship. The location is typically central to a rural community but not on main highways, easily accessible but not high traffic. And the psychology is powerful. Churches represent community and sanctuary, not wealth or threat. Even in collapse, people have complicated feelings about churches that can work in your favor. The advantages are structural and social. The large open interior can be subdivided for different functions: sleeping, storage, workshop. The high ceilings often found in churches provide thermal benefits and space for overhead storage. The side rooms provide natural separation of functions without building walls. Sunday school rooms become private sleeping areas, storage, or specific workspaces. The kitchen, even if basic, provides existing infrastructure for food preparation, and church kitchens were designed to feed crowds, which means large sinks, counter space, and often commercial-grade equipment that was donated. The basement, if present, provides cold storage, root cellar capability, and additional space that's thermally stable and hidden from casual observation. Many churches have wells or good water access because they needed water for various functions, giving you another path to water security. The social psychology of churches is complex but useful. If you occupy a church, you can position yourself as protecting it or maintaining it, which gives you a legitimate reason for presence that actually makes you look good rather than suspicious. You can offer the space for community functions or shelter, which creates relationships and makes you valuable rather than isolated. The religious association means most people won't desecrate or attack a church even in collapse. There are psychological barriers that persist, which provides a different kind of security than physical barriers. And if you actually have religious inclination, restarting services or gatherings creates a community infrastructure that makes you a leader rather than a target, though this requires genuine community service, not just pretense. The practical approach involves respecting the space while using it functionally. You establish residence in the side rooms or basement, not the main sanctuary, keeping the primary space available and respected. You maintain the building's appearance and function, doing actual maintenance that preserves the structure, which justifies your presence as caretaker. You offer the space for legitimate community needs, meeting location, emergency shelter, whatever makes sense, creating social relationships that provide security through integration rather than isolation. You keep religious symbols and items intact and respected. Even if you're not religious, this psychological architecture provides protection. And you've positioned yourself as the person maintaining community infrastructure, which is a valuable role that provides legitimacy and security without requiring weapons or fortifications.
Here's what ties these 5 location types together and why they work when compounds fail. They're all psychologically invisible or acceptably visible. They all have infrastructure that provides resources, they all avoid the target painting that defensive measures create, and they all provide plausible reasons for occupation that don't advertise preparedness. The framework is about understanding that survival security comes from not being threatened in the first place, which means not being seen as a threat or a resource worth taking. Compounds fail because they advertise both. We have supplies worth defending, and we're ready to fight you for them, which is an invitation to conflict. These abandoned locations succeed because they say, there's nothing here of value, or there's someone here doing legitimate work, or this is community infrastructure, not personal wealth, all of which avoid triggering the threat response. The resource multiplication factor is significant. A water treatment plant gives you water security, which solves the biggest survival problem. A fire station gives you covered workspace and storage, which multiplies your efficiency. An abandoned motel gives you distributed secure spaces, which provides both safety and capacity. A commercial greenhouse gives you food production, which creates trade value. A rural church gives you community integration, which provides social security. Each location provides infrastructure that would cost massive resources and time to build from scratch, but exists already. You just have to recognize and use it. This is the multiplier law applied to locations. One choice gives you multiple capabilities: structural integrity, plus resources, plus psychological camouflage, plus plausible presence, versus a compound that gives you one thing: a place to die defending. The mathematics of security favor invisibility over defense. Defending a position requires constant resource expenditure: personnel, weapons, ammunition, vigilance, calories, psychological stress, all costs that accumulate until you break. Being invisible or acceptably visible requires minimal resource expenditure, just maintaining the appearance and not drawing attention, which is sustainable indefinitely. The historical evidence supports this. In every collapse or conflict, the survivors are the ones who weren't noticed or weren't worth bothering, not the ones who fought heroically and won, because heroic wins are temporary and eventually you lose. The people surviving in Sarajevo weren't holding barricades, they were hiding in basements and moving at night. The people surviving in Syria weren't defending compounds, they were disappearing into the population or hiding in infrastructure. The people surviving in Venezuela aren't the ones with fortified homes, they're the ones who left, or who keep such a low profile that they're not worth robbing. Invisibility beats defense because defense is a resource drain that eventually fails, while invisibility is a sustainable state that costs almost nothing.
So here's what you actually do with this information. First, scout these locations now before collapse. Identify abandoned water plants, closed fire stations, defunct motels, empty greenhouses, closed churches in your region. Visit them, assess their condition, understand the access and infrastructure. Second, understand that you're not looking for perfect, you're looking for functional. Structural integrity matters more than aesthetics. Water access matters more than comfort. Psychological invisibility matters more than defensive features. Third, prepare to move. If your primary plan is staying at your home, that's fine for early stages, but have these locations identified as fallback positions when staying home becomes untenable. Know how to get there and what you need to bring. Fourth, think through the operational security. How do you occupy without advertising? How do you maintain the abandoned or legitimate appearance? What's your cover story if someone asks what you're doing there? And fifth, consider community rather than isolation. Some of these locations, like churches and fire stations, lend themselves to community functions, which provides better security than solo defense. You become valuable rather than vulnerable. The people who survive collapse aren't the ones in fortified compounds having dramatic last stands. They're the ones in forgotten infrastructure that nobody bothers to check, doing legitimate work that makes them valuable rather than threatening, or simply being so psychologically invisible that they're not worth the effort to investigate. They understood that the best fortress is the one that doesn't look like a fortress, that security comes from not being perceived as a threat or a target, and that resources spent on fortification are resources wasted when invisibility is cheaper and more effective. Your tactical compound might feel secure, but feelings don't matter. Mathematics matters, and the mathematics of defense say you eventually lose, while the mathematics of concealment say you can stay invisible indefinitely if you're smart about it. This is Fallout Rat, signing off from somewhere you'll never find. Stay filthy, stay smart, stay invisible when everyone else is building walls that just tell raiders where the supplies are. Because the fortress you never see is stronger than the fortress you defend. Infrastructure beats fortification, and psychological camouflage beats physical barriers every single time. The best defense is not needing to defend because nobody knows you exist, and these abandoned locations are how you achieve that, while the tactical preppers paint targets on themselves. See you never, because if you're doing this right, we won't see each other at all.